Take two then. So, good afternoon once again, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining today's General Membership Meeting of the Management Association of the Philippines on the theme Governance Champions How Independent Directors Create Value. Please settle down comfortably. We will now begin our program with the invocation and the Philippine National Anthem. So, with this, may I request everyone to pause and bow our heads for a short prayer to be followed by the Philippine National Anthem. Our most merciful God, we come to you in our weakness. We come to you in our fear. We come to you with trust, for you alone are our hope. We place before you the disease present in our world. We turn to you in our time of need. Bring wisdom to doctors, give understanding to scientists, endow caregivers with compassion and generosity. Bring healing to those who are ill. Protect those who are most at risk. Give comfort to those who have lost a loved one. Welcome those who have died into your eternal home. Stabilize our communities. Unite us in our compassion. Remove all fear from our hearts. Fill us with confidence in your care. Amen.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas. Kayang magiliw, elas ng sinakanan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyag ka ng magiting, sa manlulupin, di ka pasisitil, sa gagatang tutok sa simoy at sa langit mong pagaw, ay hinatang tulang awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang isang ng matawad mo'y tagumpay na nagkikinig, ang bituin at araw niya kailan ang ay di magkikinig. Luman ang araw ng buwan, bakit pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang hinigaya ng pagkay mga amin, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Thank you. On behalf of MAP President Gigi Montinola, who is presently abroad, may I request the Vice President of MAP, who is also Vice Chair and COO of KPMG RG Manabat and Company, Attorney Noel Bunoan, to deliver the welcome remarks. Attorney Noel.
Thank you, JJ. To our panelists, Attorney Nanette Lavares, to MAP Governor Fred Pascual, Ms. Flor Cariela, and Dr. Roman Zaila, to our distinguished guests from government and diplomatic circle, the academe and media, to our Board of Governors, my fellow MAP members, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I welcome all of you to this MAP General Membership Meeting on Governance Champions, How Independent Directors Create Value. As articulated by President Gigi Montinola in our past General Membership meetings, the MAP theme, The Great Reset, Leading for the Common Good, continues to be a very relevant theme to the MAP in line with the ongoing quest of the country for herd immunity. In pursuing MAP's mission of promoting management excellence for nation building, your board has been focusing this year on the following three priority programs. First is to safely reopen the economy. Second is to promote shared prosperity and environmental, social, and governance, or ESG. And the third is to enhance member benefits via best practice sharing. On the topic safely reopen the economy, we are glad that the first tranche of the Moderna vaccine, although only 1% of the total order, has finally arrived. This will certainly help in achieving the necessary herd immunity for a safe and healthy reopening of the Philippine economy. The MAP is entitled to 370 doses for 185 vaccines for the first tranche. Out of the 185 vaccinees, 150 have been vaccinated at the Soler ICTSI Vaccination Center. And out of the remaining 35 vaccinees, 30 were vaccinated by AC Health, while 5 are still being processed. We expect a second tranche of another 1% within this week, so stay tuned for that. On the topic of ESG, today's GMM addresses the letter G, or the governance part of ESG. Through this GMM, we hope to be enlightened on recent developments on how independent directors create value and how they really contribute to the success of their respective organizations. Also under the governance part of ESG, MEP has joined the July 7, 2021 Business Groups and Foreign Chambers call for the passage of 17 priority reform bills as Congress resumes its final session year. For the letter E, or environmental part of ESG, MEP supported the July 3 and 4 Day of Climate Action through the MEP Climate Crisis Committee, chaired by Rak Kagurana. The MEP has also been invited to co-sign the joint statement entitled A Call for Concerted Action to Reduce Air Pollution and Mitigate the Climate Crisis, which was initiated by the Green EDSA movement. For the S, or the social justice part of ESG, MEP has been involved in the following activities due to the critical impact of the 2022 elections in the country's economic development. The first is that MAP contributed 1 million pesos on May 20, 2021 to Election 2022 Coalition for its voter registration program that aims to convince 7 million young new voters and deactivated voters to register by September 30, 2021. Former MEP member Christian Bunson, who heads the legal network for Truthful Elections, or LENTE, is the lead convener for this coalition. 2, MAP co-signed the Election 22 Coalition Manifesto entitled 1 Year to Go, 7 Million is Key, a unity statement by the Election 2022 Coalition and Filipinos for Voter Registration. 3, MAP also co-signed the unity statement entitled A Solidarity Call to Action, Make the 2022 election safe, fair, and free for all, which was initiated by the Ateneo School of Government through former MEP member Ron Mendoza. At our meeting this morning, the MEP board approved MEP's contribution of 1 million pesos for the voter education program of the Parish Pastoral Council for Responsible Voting, or PPCRV, which was requested of MAP through its chair, Milo Villanueva. In relation to this, we do encourage the membership, the individual members of MAP, to voluntarily match the 1 million pesos donation of the MEP itself. More details will be released by the MEP Executive Secretariat, and we do encourage you to get involved in this program. Voter registration is necessary to ensure that everyone entitled to vote can do so. The accuracy of the voter registry is a key element in ensuring that all qualified constituents can enjoy the right to vote. On member benefits, may I invite you to the July 21 MAP Arts and Culture Lecture, which will focus on art collection and collectibles, up-and-coming Filipino artists, and paintings by our national artists. The speaker will be Mr. Richie Lerma, Chair and Chief Specialist of Salcedo Auctions. This is the 5th of the Arts and Culture Lecture Series of the MEP Arts and Culture Committee, chaired by Eddie Yap and myself as Governor in charge of the committee. Please join the first MEP Virtual Steps Challenge, which will be held for 3 months from July 16 to September 30, 2021. This program will offer participants and sponsors a great opportunity to do their much needed walking or exercise during this health emergency. At the same time, enable them to do their share for CSR. The net proceeds of the first MEP Virtual Steps Challenge will be used as follows: 50% for the MEP's Teachers Training Program and 50% for MEP's other CSR programs and other programs. This is a project of the MEP Sports Fellowship and Wellness Committee chaired by Peng Perez de Tagle. Our next GMM on August 10 will focus on ensuring the country's energy security, which is being organized by the MEP Energy Committee chaired by Ernie Pantanco. And I can assure you, as the government charge of the Energy Committee, that it'll be a very interesting talk we'll have, and I do urge you to tune in for that. On September 7, MEP and the Philippine Management Association of the Philippines will hold a joint general membership meeting to focus on leapfrogging digital talent development. This will be coordinated by the MEP Management and Human Capital Development Committee, chaired by Attorney Rico de Guzman. Also, please block off your calendars for the very important 19th MEP International CEO Web Conference, which will be held on September 14, 2021 from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. The theme of our CEO conference will be hindsights, insights, foresights, the future in the present tense. And like all MEP conferences past, this promises to have a stellar lineup of speakers. On the MEP Management Man of the Year for 2021, I would like to remind all MEP members that you have until August 20 to submit your nominations for MEP Management Man of the Year 2021. Please help the Management Man of the Year Search Committee, chaired by Attorney Francis Lim, and the Management Man of the Year Judging Committee, chaired by Mr. Ed Chua, in producing the 45th recipient of the MEP Management Man of the Year Award. On the election for MEP governors for 2022 to 2023, the MEP Nomination and Election Committee, chaired by Malu Cristobal, has started sending individual letters to all qualified members who are eligible for nomination for MEP governor for 2022 to 2023. If you have not responded, kindly express your consent to be nominated not later than July 16. If we do not hear from you by July 16, we will assume that you are not willing to serve as MEP governor for 2022 to 2023. As of today, we have 54 members who have agreed to be nominated as MEP governor. We await more responses. We await more positive responses on this matter. And we encourage all qualified MEP members to please step forward and make yourselves available to be nominated as member of the MEP Board of Governors. Remember, this is your association, and your participation as an active member of the MEP Board will certainly help steer MEP to greater heights in promoting management excellence for nation building. In closing, I would like to also please remind you to monitor your email and Viber inboxes, our electronic newsletter, the MEP memo, and the MEP Facebook page, and our LinkedIn accounts for regular updates on MEP programs and activities. So just let me do a quick thank you to our panelists for sharing their time with us today. And also let me thank the MEP Corporate Governance Committee, chaired by Attorney Cesar Villanueva, together with JJ Moreno and Ida Tiomson as co-vice chairs for putting this GMM together. Thank you everyone for your continued support to the MEP. Stay safe and stay healthy. Back to you, JJ.
Thank you very much, Noel. Wow. No amount of pandemic can really stop MEP from all of those activities and programs that you have just outlined. Thank you very much. And so the membership, we're now calling on the membership to please participate and support all of those programs.
That's right. There's a lot of things happening, and we really will appreciate everything that all the members do.
Correct. Yeah. And speaking of members, Noel, The lifeblood of any organization is actually its membership, and MAP included. And as we continue on with our advocacies, it is just but proper for us to expand also our membership. So at this point, I would like to call on the chair of the MAP Membership Committee, the Senior Legal Counsel of Accra Law, Attorney Francis Lim, my former boss, to present, and forever boss, to present the new MAP members for the online induction. Attorney Francis, over to you.
Thank you very much, JJ. You're right. Our members are the lifeblood of the organization. And therefore, I'm pleased to announce that this afternoon, we're inducting 7 new MAP members who will increase our total membership from 1,052 to 1,059. May I now read the names of our inductees. Number 1, Mr. Syed Muhammad Ahmad Ali Ahmad, General Manager of Etihad Airways Philippines, line of business, commercial airline operation. Sponsors, Miss Rebecca, Rebecca Garcia, and yours truly. Number 2, Miss Rina Lopez, of President of Knowledge Channel, a line of business education. Sponsors are yours truly and Miss Risa Bantaring. Number 3, Mr. Ian Philip Ian Puyekeng, EVP and Chief Operating Officer, Philippine British Assurance Company, Inc., line of business, non-life insurance. Sponsors are Mr. Ed Francisco and yours truly. Next, please. Mr. Jose Enrique Joan de las Peñas, President and CEO, Manila Bankers Insurance Corporation, line of business, insurance. Sponsors, Mr. Reynaldo T. Casas and yours truly. Next, please. Mr. Anthony Unjan, Managing Director and Senior Partner, Boston Consulting, BCG, Southeast Asia, line of business, Global Management Consulting Firm. Sponsors are yours truly and Ms. Risa Mantarin. And last but not the least, my brad, Mr. Tranquil Gervaso Salvador III, Chair, Manila Bankers Insurance Corporation, line of business, insurance. Sponsors, Mr. Reynaldo T. Casas and yours truly. At this point, I would like to call our MAP Vice President, Attorney Noel Bunowan, to lead the online induction of our new members. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. So to our inductees, may I ask you to hold your oath of membership with your left hand and raise your right hand and follow and recite after me. I
Jose Enrique de las Peñas,
Tranquil Salvador III,
Anthony Unjan,
do hereby solemnly pledge
do hereby
solemnly
pledge
I will perform well and faithfully
I will
perform well and faithfully
to the best of my ability my duties as a regular member.
the best
to the best of my ability
duties as a regular
member.
as a regular member.
In order to contribute to the achievement of the objectives
in order to
contribute to the achievement of objectives
of the Management Association of the Philippines, so help me God.
of the Management Association of the Philippines,
so help me God.
Congratulations, everyone, and welcome to the MAP.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Back to you, JJ.
Yes, thank you very much, and congratulations to the new members of the MAP. At this point, you now can brace your Viber accounts, and you'll be getting a lot of these Viber messages soon. Arnold will make sure that he would have your Viber accounts. There is not a shortage of activities that you could actually participate in. So we welcome you to MAP, and we look forward to seeing you in our events and, of course, our initiatives. So at this point, we now have reached the other part of our program where we are going to listen to speakers. But before that, some house rules. And before we hear from our presentations from our panelists, these are some of the rules. First is that as participants for this GMM, you are automatically muted and your camera and video is also switched off. You may submit your questions through the Q&A box that you will see on your screen with the assistance of the MAP Secretariat. I will read the questions on your behalf. Lastly, you will only be able to see the panelists, but you will not be able to view the other participants. Okay, so in line with the MAP policy and the interest of time, we will dispense with the lengthy introductions of our panelists. But as moderator of this Q&A and this sharing session, I would like to give a brief opening remarks. The main role of non-executive directors is to provide independent judgment, outside experience, and objectivity on all issues which come before the board. They are perceived to be in a better position to make objective decisions and to assess management recommendations because they have less personal interest in those decisions and recommendations. In practice, corporations look for a number of qualities in these independent directors. Experience, integrity, and judgment are foremost among these qualities. Today, we are very fortunate to have three leading independent directors who do not only exhibit these qualities, but also have distinguished themselves in the practice of corporate directorship, particularly in their capacities as independent directors. We are likewise very happy to have with us today a senior member of the World Bank IFC's Corporate Governance Group and head of the East Asia Pacific region to present to us the perspective of a multilateral organization that is not only recognized as a global thought leader on corporate governance, but also an investor that nominates directors in their investee companies. At this point, I would like to remind our panelists that they are given 5 to 10 minutes for their opening statements. May I therefore call on our first panelist. Please welcome the Independent Director of Metrobank and PruLife UK, Attorney Angelica Nenette Lavares. Over to you, Attorney Nenette.
Hi, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Independent directors as governance champions. Sounds important and daunting, but more than sounding great, an independent director is, in more ways than one, a servant leader, one who, having no material or pecuniary relationship with a company or related persons, can and will put the greater good of the company over any personal or group interest, one who serves with integrity. I've had the good fortune of serving as an independent director of a financing company, a credit card company, a publicly listed universal bank, and a wholly owned subsidiary of a foreign company. It is my experience in a wholly owned subsidiary of a foreign company that has given me a better grasp and appreciation of the value that an independent director can contribute to the company. Now we have companies with directors who are not merely on board for prestige, status, or the old boys club syndrome. We have directors who direct and control the operations of the company collegially, who are at the forefront of laying down the mission, vision, and the corporate values that the company should stand for. The independent director distinguishes himself because he has no hidden agenda to support, except what is good for the company and all of its stakeholders, the stockholders, the employees, the customers, the supply chain, the community, the environment. Let me now focus on my experience as an independent director of a company that is wholly owned by a foreign company. How does an independent director contribute value? Is there independence? Is there corporate governance? Yes, absolutely. A resounding yes. The foreign company is a public limited company, a PLC headquartered in London, established in 1848. I was invited to join the company upon the recommendation and endorsement of the ICB. Being a foreign company, it is easy to understand that it would not have immediate access to information on personalities who may qualify as independent directors. Thus, after meeting with the top executives, including those who flew in from Hong Kong, I came on board. The onboarding process for the company is excellent. A meeting with the top executives was set up, with each senior executive orienting me on what his unit was responsible for. I was supplied with a tablet which contained all the pertinent data on the company and to which all the materials for future meetings were sent via the Diligent app. Assignment to the membership in board committees was smooth, and considering that the local company had been around for 25 years or so, the processes and procedures and compliance with the regulatory requirements were always diligently met. Now that developments are evolving globally as well as locally, and with the pandemic upending everything that we considered normal, we have had to grapple with the intricacies of compliance, particularly with the requirements on chairmanship and membership in board committees. The Insurance Commission has made recent issuances on the matter. The chairman of the board cannot chair any other board committee. The chairman of the audit committee cannot also chair any other board committee. Being a 7-man board with 4 independent directors, we have had to double hat and contend with membership in many committees. On the plus side, this has enabled us to interact more with each other. The challenge arose when a member of senior management left, and soon after, so did a member of the board, and this during the pandemic. Having no minority shareholder, our parent company does have control over these matters. While our local company has a succession plan in place, which has been vetted and approved by the board, it becomes a completely different matter and quite unsettling if the vacancy is at the senior level and also at the board level, especially when these are unplanned, unexpected, and during the pandemic at that. When we were advised that our parent had replacements in mind, we, the independent directors, realized that this was well within the prerogative of our parent company. But having the principles of corporate governance deeply ingrained in us, and perhaps even an intrinsic part of our DNA, I, as chair of the Governance and Nomination Committee, requested our global superiors for a meeting and therein explained our concern that even if we are wholly owned and even if by right they can choose whomever, we wanted them to understand that there is a process that may and should in fact involve the local company. For after all, it is the local company's operations that is at stake. At that meeting, our leaders in the UK explained to us the methodology in place, that there is a global unit tasked with ensuring that there is a ready pool of highly qualified candidates with sufficient background and experience in the company as they are currently employed in the various other units globally, but ready to move at a moment's notice. These candidates were screened and vetted for the positions available in the Philippines, and they were deemed to be highly suitable candidates. What we requested then was to be able to meet with these candidates, not so much that we questioned their qualifications, but more because we wanted the opportunity to meet them, talk with them, get to know their backgrounds, their thoughts, their culture, have a feel of these candidates and assess their ability to blend, a feel of their personalities, an exchange of ideas on various topics, their culture, their strengths. All this beyond just reading the impressive curriculum vitae that we were furnished. All this was made possible thanks to technology and virtual platforms, enabling us to see and chat, a session of exchanging views, personal and professional. And having had our chat, we were assured that indeed a serendipitous choice was made, especially considering the urgent need of the company at this time. Our parent company appreciated our concern over the choice of replacements, and were in fact gratified that we were actively involved in the matter of filling up vacancies with as perfect choices as possible, given our present circumstances. The independent directors were successful in communicating to the parent company that we do value our role, that we do want to protect the gains that our company has made over the last years, that we are very much involved and concerned about our company's operations and business. We could have simply sat back and accepted quietly our parents' choice. We could have simply acquiesced and we would have gone on business as usual. But that is what independent director is all about. It is about exercising freely one's judgment in determining what is good for the company. It is about having a voice and making it heard. It is about being able to question where a clarification is needed. And in my case, it works because fortunately, our parent company, established in 1848, is itself steeped in governance. There may be instances when complacency creeps in, but that is precisely the role of the independent director, to ensure that the affairs of the company are directed and controlled collegially and not simply dictated. That is the challenge to each independent director. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Attorney Leonard. Very, very insightful indeed. No? Servant leadership and the role of independent directors and the value you created when you filled up and the role you played in filling up the vacancies at the board at the executive level and challenging a headquarters in London. So very good and an excellent example of a value creation in the board by an independent director. Thank you very much for that. For a second panelist, may I please call on Dr. Alfredo Fred Pascual, the lead independent director of SN Investments Corporation. Dr. Pascual, please, over to you. Dr. Pascual?
Yes, JJ, I'm here.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, sir.
Yeah. Well, let me start with a bit of history. Following World War II, the idea of having outside disinterested members on corporate boards was introduced in the United States. And it has become a board practice in that country as a mechanism for good governance. The practice has steadily gained popularity over time. From the US, the concept has spread throughout the world and is now recognized in different jurisdictions, including many Asian countries, as well as the Philippines. The legal transplantation of board independence is pervasive in Asian best practices, listing standards and regulatory obligations now. The view is that independent board members can bring objective opinion or position relative to a number of things like evaluation of performance of the board, related party transactions, succession planning, remunerations of executive, etc. Now, when the transplantation was done, it has been recognized also the big difference in the ownership structure of or shareholding structure of Western companies, US, UK, and Asian companies, where ownership is concentrated in the hands of dominant families, or in some other countries in our neighborhood, in the hands of the government. This is a stark contrast that has to be recognized. So whereas the idea of an independent director was meant to address the agency problem between management on one hand and the dispersed shareholders, in the Asian context, it has changed. The focus of independent directors is on agency issues between the controlling family, who most of the time also control management on one hand and the minority shareholders. In any case, the role of ID has been accepted and has formed part of our legal structure in the Philippines. It's in the Corporation Code and in the Code of Corporate Governance for PLCs and registered corporation. While the idea or concept of independent director has been there for many decades now, the concept of a lead independent director is a new phenomenon, relatively new. The lead independent director role gained attention and momentum as investor advocacy groups and the popular press in the US called for the separation of the CEO and the board chairman roles. That has been the practice in many publicly listed companies in the US. The same person occupies both the chair position and the CEO position. The National Association of Corporate Directors, NACD, promoted the idea of a lead independent director as a credible alternative to separating the roles of CEO and the board chairman. Because they were also concerned that separating the two positions will diffuse power and will weaken the ability of the CEO to run the business. So what happened, notably in 2003, both the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ adopted the listing requirements on corporate governance that, while not mandating the separation of CEO and board chairman roles, nor the creation of a lead independent director position, required non-management directors of listed companies to meet separately from management directors. So there is now a distinction between the non-executive and the executive directors. The desired structure, of course, is to have the two separate. Independent monitoring of important CEO power leads to entrenchment and increases agency cost. So in any case, since there are issues about it, a compromise solution was adopted, which is the appointment of the lead independent director. The arrangement allows more managerial autonomy while maintaining necessary monitoring. The updated Code of Corporate Governance of 2019 formalizes the recommendation that the board of corporations in the Philippines should designate a lead director among the independent directors if the chairperson of the board is not independent, including if the positions of the chairperson of the board and chief executive officer are held by one person. The code explains that in cases where the chairperson is not independent and where the roles of chair and CEO are combined, putting in place proper mechanisms to ensure independent views and perspectives is desired. More importantly, this will prevent abuse of power and authority and potential and/or actual conflict of interest. And of course, the solution is the appointment of a lead independent director. Now, in the Code of Corporate Governance, the stated functions of the lead director among the independent directors include the following: serves as an intermediary between the chairperson and the other directors when necessary, convenes and chairs meetings of the non-executive directors, including independent directors, and contributes to the performance evaluation of the chairperson as required. Well, I've been appointed recently as lead independent director of a major conglomerate. It's the holding company of the conglomerate. It's a relatively new phenomenon Uh, in the case of that company, the position of chair and the position of CEO are held by different individuals. So the condition under which the appointment of a lead independent director does not exist in that holding company. In any case, it's good practice that there be a lead independent director, given that the chairman and the CEO are not, or at least the chairman is not viewed as independent because he was a former executive of the organization. The situation has not really called for a strong intervention by the lead independent director in the organization, given this very highly professional way in which the holding company is being managed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pascual. Indeed, in any advocacy or transformation effort, context is important. And the context that you provided us by first walking us through the history of independent directorship and the context as well of presenting to us the difference between two corporate governance regimes, being the Western regime where the agency problem is more between the shareholders and the executive team, as opposed to in Asia, where the challenge would be between the controlling shareholders and the role of the independent directors there. It's also nice to know that you are in a role that is not too common at the moment, and despite the fact, and kudos to your organization, despite the fact that it is not required, they have still decided to put that the position up. So although you said there has not been any use for any intervention, we look forward to hearing from you in the future perhaps on how a lead independent director will function. So thank you once again, Dr. Pascual. So at this point, when we call on, and speaking of chairperson and independent chairperson, our next speaker, please welcome our third panelist, is the former independent director and board chairperson of the Philippine National Bank. She, by the way, is the first and only independent chairperson in the commercial banking industry. So, Ms. Flor Cariela, we welcome and we look forward to your sharing. Thank you very much and for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, JJ, and a very pleasant good afternoon to the Management Association of the Philippines. It is my honor to be with you as a governance champion and a panelist on the topic of independent directors. When did my journey as a board director begin? It started when I joined government service as Undersecretary of Finance. Coming from the banking sector, Citibank, I was designated as alternate director of then Finance Secretary Titoy Pardo in the boards of Land Bank, PDIC, and the Bangko Central's Monetary Board. It was in the BSP that I became fully aware of the role of a board member. It was when ICD's Jess Stanislao and Arvind Mathur presented corporate governance and the board members' role and responsibilities. I realized that as a board member, you cannot be a wallpaper. You cannot be a plant box in the room, but rather you should be active. You should ask questions, especially on critical issues, given the heavy responsibility involved. Because during that time, di ba, Fred, the board members sitting pretty lang, not anymore. It became very clear to me that directors' loyalty is to the company, and a director should always act according to the best interests of the company to enhance shareholder value. I joined PNB as a director in 2001 as a government nominee. And then I was nominated as an independent director of PNB in 2006 after I had been elected as chairwoman. This has been approved by the BSP, my being an independent director. So this means I am independent of management, I am free from any business or other relationships, and I am not part of the day-to-day management of PNB. So I was a regular director for the first 5 years in PNB. Then I became an independent director chairman for 15 years in PNB. And I stepped down only this year because of the 9-year term limit for IDs counting from 2012. Now, independent directors are critical in boards and they play an important role, especially in banks, because in banks, they are specifically named to chair and be members of oversight committees such as risk, audit, compliance, corporate governance, and related party committees. Independent directors with their detached judgment, their outside experience, and objective view of management and operations play an active role in these oversight committees to ensure corporate governance. For banks, 30% of the board should be independent directors. So if you have a 15-member board, 5 is the minimum number of independent directors. It is also suggested that the oversight committees be majority independent directors, if not all, are composed of independent directors. The primary goal of an independent director is to improve corporate credibility and governance standards. So, again, independent directors can create value with their external viewpoint, independent mindset, and constructive discussions of management recommendations. But is that all? Well, I have some very simple tips, for IDs. Number 1, the ID should know his or her role. And what is that? To be involved mainly in policies, the general directions of the company, and leave the day-to-day operations to management. In other words, you have to balance micromanaging, together with management. This is difficult for some who have been in management positions. Number 2, you may be good, but if you're not active in discussions during the committee meetings, you're not going to be effective. So the IDs should give time and energy to the topics discussed. How do you do that? In addition to bringing your expertise, your skills and knowledge, and your open-mindedness to the board, you have to prepare for the meetings. You have to know what is the agenda, what is the topic to be discussed, and ask questions to clarify issues. Sometimes you can even ask questions even before the meeting, so that you don't waste time during the committee or the board meeting. It is very important to have a good knowledge of the company's operations to make decisions on issues before the board. And if the issue is something that you're not familiar with, not comfortable with, you should be secure and confident enough to ask and even request for an expert opinion or a consultant to the board. Third, the ID should continuously learn and improve himself, especially now in this digital world, reskill and upskill. You should know the latest developments and trends. There are so many webinars going on, like in this case, the map on corporate governance. Be interested for new knowledge, new trends, and directions. Network, membership in associations like MAP, FINEX, BIFIL, and if you're a woman, Women Business Philippines, Women in Finance, or the Filipina Circle CEO. There are just so many information you get just being a part of these networks. And number 4, know, embrace, and champion a corporate governance principle. Be an advocate, be a champion. For example, since I was the chair of PNB, I'm an independent director, and I also chair the Corporate Governance Committee. The Corporate Governance Committee of PNB wanted to make a mark in corporate governance. And what is a better way for a PLC to make a mark in corporate governance than the ASEAN scorecard? So every year, we intentionally try to improve our corporate governance, and I'm happy to report that PNB has been recognized with the 3 Golden Arrow Award in 2019. In 2020, we are still waiting, but we are hopeful that we will get the 4 Golden Arrow Award. One additional item that we had included for corporate governance in 2020 is a board evaluation by an external party. We asked ICD to do it for PNB, and I'm happy to say that there were some suggestions, but I believe that we passed with flying colors. Now, can an ID? So my suggestion is be a champion, no, in your company. But can an ID, okay, do it alone? Unfortunately, not. An ID can initiate the idea, you can follow through, but you still need the support of the rest of the board and, of course, management to implement. Communications is very important to have everyone on the same page for the value that you're trying to create. And again, teamwork is key. You know, we all know ESG, sustainability, gender equality, environment, climate change. So my suggestion to directors, IDs, and even non-IDs, be the champion for this in your company. So these are just 4 simple tips that I have for IDs. This is not all-encompassing. Again, know your role in the board. Be active. You prepare. Always learn continuously to improve yourself. And be a champion and enhance in this corporate governance principle. So in conclusion, for me, the independent director, because of the specific task assigned to them, with their independence, their objective view, their wide experience, their insights and networks, they are valuable assets to the company. And especially if they provide time, attention, focus, and passion. Even more would be an independent director who has a proven track record. Someone who has a reputation to protect, and someone who is mad, meaning wants to make a difference in this world. That ID will definitely contribute to the company's goal and enhance its value. So indeed, the ID role is very critical, especially in this VUCA, abnormally new normal world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tariela. Very interesting indeed. Thank you also for walking us through your journey as an independent director and your reminder for us to take our jobs as independent directors very seriously. And despite the fact that being plantitos and plantitas are in vogue right now, we cannot be that flower vase or that flower pot that we are, that we might find directors in before. And thank you also for the tips. And my takeaway there is that a good executive does not necessarily make a good director. So there has to be some processing, there has to be some preparations, there has to be some continuous development and improvement for one to become an effective director, even if he or she was a good executive. But I like the whole mad thing, to get mad, make a difference. I think that was the best key takeaway there. As independent directors, always get mad, make a difference. So great. Thank you very much. We now have to shift gears a bit, and after listening to 3 great speakers talk about their rich experience as independent directors in the Philippine context, we would want to hear an international perspective. So for a 4th panelist, I would like to call on the Senior Corporate Governance Officer and currently the Regional Corporate Governance Lead for East Asia Pacific of the International Finance Corporation, who's based actually in Bangkok, but was joining us, I understand, from Washington, D.C., to give us that perspective of an international multilateral organization, at the same time an investor in many of these companies, which they look at corporate governance very seriously. So, Dr. Roman, over to you. Thank you for joining us.
Many thanks, JJ, and good afternoon to everybody. Let me first offer a word of thanks to the Management Association of the Philippines for the invitation and the opportunity to speak to you very early this morning here in Washington. It's a fascinating panel, and again, JJ, thanks for introducing it as a shift in gear, because indeed I suspect this will be a little bit. So JJ approached me to speak on the subject, or rather, the MAP approached me to speak on the subject from the perspective of a corporate governance enlightened organization. So allow me to perhaps put this conversation on independent directors and bringing value to companies in the context through which we see it as an investment organization. So just again, for a little bit of context, so you understand who we are in more concrete terms, IFC, as part of the World Bank Group, is the largest global development institution that's focused on the private sector in emerging markets. We have over 60 years of experience in challenging markets, with a current presence in more than 100 places. We have approximately 2,000 private sector clients in our portfolio. And I think that in many ways, we're uniquely positioned to address not only structural questions of economic development and financial development in markets, but I think when it comes to our approach to matters of governance, for example, such as developing boards through the nomination of directors, we've got quite a sort of a history and a foundation upon which to build. Among the various products that we use in our financial work, then we have the debt products, but it's the equity investments that we make, and those investments provide that developmental support and long-term growth capital for our clients. We directly invest in these companies and financial institutions. We provide them with equity, but as part and parcel of that support, we take up often the right to take part in the discussions at the table at the board. And again, just for context purposes, in financial year 20, our equity investments accounted for about $1 billion worth of commitments from our own account. So not an insignificant number. IFC generally invests between 5 and 20% into a company's equity. In the past, we have been passive in our approach, but I think the last decade or two have really pushed us, within the global context of how corporate governance has been evolving. I think has pushed us to be more active, and our nominee director program has become far more formalized and structured as we go forward. So within this context, let me turn to our nominee directors themselves. Our nominee directors are asked to serve on the boards of client companies, and they are asked to serve as focused members of the board rather than as representatives of IFC's. And I'll explain that just a little bit. Again, just for context as well, we currently have approximately 140 nominee directors, and I'm very happy to let you know that 50% of our nominees currently are women. So it's a nice, very nice gender balance, which is always pleasing. When we get engaged with companies through our equity positions, our aim is to seek best practices in corporate governance. It's a cornerstone to our investment. It's something that we have for a long time believed was very important. We focus a lot of energy in understanding companies' corporate governance practices as a means of helping them adjust, helping them improve, helping them become better selves as corporate bodies. And our efforts are to ensure that boards of directors exercise objective and independent judgment, which each one of the previous speakers has alluded to in one way or another. IFC nominee directors are expected to commit adequate time and attention to their board responsibilities and to act uninformed basis. And again, everybody who's spoken prior to me has made it very, very clear that that is an expectation that is had of independent directors. It's absolutely the case, and we insist that that's what our nominees undertake as part of their good faith work. We expect that they act with due care and in the best interests of their respective companies and for the shareholders. Now, as our directors serve on boards of their investee companies, they are told quite explicitly that they are there to add value to the operations and to create shareholder value consistent with our development mandate. And that is about as close as we get to providing them with an instruction as to how they should behave when they get to the board table. We are explicit in their appointment letters that they are there to act in the best interests of the company, and that is the direction that they're to have. Our policies are very clear. The nominee director owes his fiduciary duties to the investee company and not to IFC. That is explicitly stated in the appointment letter. We also state that the director does not serve as an IFC representative for purposes of exercising IFC shareholder and contractual rights. This is a discussion that has been going on for a very long time at IFC, and I would refer to some old days when there was a tendency to nominate a lot of IFC staff members as our nominee directors. There was always a very difficult debate as to whether or not our board representatives, our nominee directors, were there to push IFC short-term interests as investors, or whether or not we were supposed to be asking our directors to pursue the long-term interests of the company. And that was a debate that continued for some time. I would say probably up until the last decade. And since then, we have now, as I mentioned, explicitly stated to our nominee directors, most of whom are not IFC staff members, that they owe their allegiance in every way to the company for which they serve. When voting, we ask our nominee directors to use their own judgment based on the interests of the investee company. We do not provide them with instruction. It is common for nominee directors to have dialogue. We're allowed with our investment teams, with our management. However, there is an expectation that they are not provided instructions on a decision-by-decision basis. Rather, they are seeking information from the shareholder, but they do so broadly with other shareholders as well. Now, it's true that there is confusion in this position, and it's not uncommon to see other investors around the table or other members of the board around the table looking at IFC's nominee and figuring that these are representatives of IFC as a shareholder. That perception is a difficult one to avoid. And it is one that, while we very clearly state unequivocally that these are nominee directors who are not there to represent our interests, but rather that of the company, we can't avoid the perception that does or that may exist. And so again, we are as clear as we can be in our appointment letters. We are as clear as we can be in our relationship with the nominee directors, in our preparation of those nominee directors through their induction course, through their preparation courses. But inevitably that happens. So in order to mitigate that potential confusion that might exist, whether that director is an independent director or a nominee director with a shareholder link, IFC asserts its interest in relation to the investment via this contractual agreement, via this appointment letter, and while IFC itself has a contract with the company for its equity position, it doesn't, again, direct the nominee director to vote in IFC's interest. And that, again, is publicly asserted by the organization. Some nominees, often staff, are often required to recuse themselves in votes that relate specifically to IFC's interests. And while non-staff have no obligation to do so, where the perception is clear and where there may be some discussion on that individual's role as an IFC nominee, then there have been cases where people have recused themselves in conversation and in some of the decisions where warranted. But there are ways by which we can support nominees in the way they navigate this, and so we don't come out with a clear or any solid concrete position on whether or not they should or should not recuse themselves. We allow them to use their best judgment and to feel the room and whatever the discussion or the sentiment is at the time. So while it's arguable that IFC nominees are or independent or not, it's a term to me that, in addition to meeting the prescribed definitions, essentially reflects the perceptions of nominee directors by others around the table, and that is a live conversation that goes on all the time at board meetings where our nominees sit. But just to be very clear, IFC's nominee directors are provided with full authority and permission to behave explicitly in the best interests of the company on whose board they've been nominated. And I'm hoping that that's a little bit of a foundation upon which we can maybe build some of the conversation going forward. But I wanted to make it very clear how IFC approaches this. And again, using that really generous term, JJ, that you allowed, this enlightened organization approach. I'd like to think that IFC has made every effort to try and evolve the role of the nominee director, and whether or not that approximates the function of an independent director, we certainly hope so. We certainly would like to push it that way, but we acknowledge that it's not as easy to attain that status of independence as we may often like it, though the characteristics of those individuals are effectively, and we certainly push to have them to be effectively the same as an independent director. I'll leave it there and we'll take up some more in conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roman. And thank you very much for first presenting a context of which IFC is working. And, it's very interesting to note that, IFC is not just advocating corporate governance, it is actually, putting its money where its mouth is, in a sense. And thank you also for the candor at which, the challenges that you continue to face in having to describe perhaps the independence or not of your nominee directors. When we were putting together this session, I thought of inviting the IFC because I have done work for the IFC for investee companies, and I have met a number of these nominee directors. And what struck me most really was the fact that they are indeed making decisions on the basis of their best interest for the institution. And it really was, it stuck with me because in a way, IFC did a good job in trying to look for the right type of a nominee directors. Okay, great. So that's the 4 panelists that we have for this afternoon. We now move on to what I think is an even more exciting part of this sharing session would be the Q&A. And please get your questions coming. But I would like to kick off the question and answer with this first question from Attorney Cesar Villanueva, when he said that, what is your view on whether the chairperson of a publicly listed company should be independent or not? I mean, should the position of chair of the board be given to an independent director or not? Just interested to get your views on that question. Thank you, Cesar, for that question. Yeah, Dr. Pascual, yes, please. And then we do
I stated my view in the chat box. I said, my view is that the chairperson of publicly listed companies should be an independent director, because that enables him to remain objective in situations where there are conflicts or where there are potential conflicts between parties in the organization.
Oh, thank you very much. Ms. Flor, being an independent chair.
Well, definitely for me, yes. I have been an independent director and chairman. And in fact, as you know, I just stepped down, and the primary consideration also in choosing a successor from among the different directors, all things being equal, okay? When I say all things being equal, because some may be better than others in terms of other qualification, but all things being equal, I definitely believe an independent director should be the chairman, because immediately there is the perception of independence and there is credibility immediately. You know, there's already a perception, and that is very critical in a company. So yes, I agree.
Great. Attorney Ness?
If I may just add quickly,
please,
sorry.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think it is best practice to have the chairman also being an independent director. It provides check and balance. He works closely with the president and CEO, who obviously is not an independent director. So I think it will work best for the company if the chair of the board is an independent director.
Wait, Dr. Pascual, you wanted to say something. Thank you very much.
Well, yeah, we're talking about creating value. That's one value. That's what we may call the signaling value.
May signal, yes.
Chair. You signal to investors and to all your stakeholders, you know, that you are really following good corporate governance principles.
Yeah. Roman, any of your nominee directors end up being the chairman of the board?
Yeah, it has happened on several boards. They have taken up that position, but I think it's much more for the reasons that Flora brought up in her comment, that it's largely because of their skill and their capabilities. I think people are judged on their ability to do the job. I don't entirely agree with the panel that an independent should be the chair of a listed company. I've seen many companies, and we do see many companies that function very well with non-independents at the helm. I think that some companies may simply not be in a position to take out an independent as their chair. And again, I think it's very much up to the board to determine the dynamics that will lead a director, rather a chairperson, to be independent or not. So I would hesitate on being prescriptive about it, even though I know the question is trying to put things into a very nice box. And Flora, I really appreciated, that idea of all things being equal. Yeah, maybe that would be the right way to go. But again, I'm not on the side of over prescription in this space.
Right.
Can I say something?
Yes, please. Yes.
No. Actually, that's precisely my point. Just being an independent director, doesn't mean you're going to be better. That's why I qualified, even in my talk. You have to have the passion. You have to make a difference, because the label of independent director does not make you create value by yourself. It's what you contribute and what you bring into the company. Although as Fred, is saying, the word independent already gives a perception of being objective, and that already has value, but you have to add more to it. If you get what I'm saying, I think I'm saying the same thing as Roman, okay? Just being independent is not enough.
Correct. Roman, do you agree, however, that there is a signaling value to have a chair?
Yes, definitely.
As an independent director.
I do, JJ. I do. Fred's point is very well taken. I do think the signaling is critical. Again, I think horses for courses. I think companies need to find a good time and place to signal that sort of thing. And absolutely, it does help. But again, there are some times where you may, for the sake of an attempt at signaling, nominate an independent, but entirely not the right person for the time when it's required, and therefore the signal then gets mixed up. So I think we need to be intelligent about what we're signaling and when we signal it. I think every company's board is going to be substantially different from the next company. And again, that's why prescription to me doesn't work. I think we need to be careful about that and how we signal to the market, not just for independence sake.
Great. Thank you. Yes, Pascual. Yes.
Yeah, I would like to, give some qualification. In general, yes, independent director, the chair. But the decision will, of course, depend on what's best for the company. In the case of family-controlled, or in the case of corporations whose ownership is dispersed, surely putting an independent chair should be easy. Now, in a family-controlled corporation, it depends on the stage of development. If it's the first-time entrepreneur that's still building up the company, okay, an independent director will probably spoil, the thrust and the growth path of the company. Second generation, maybe possible, but not easy. I think when you get to the third or later generation, where conflict could start brewing, between potential heirs, that's when an independent chair would become really the solution to the situation.
That's correct.
Where the heirs are in conflict with one another as to who would be the chair or head of the company. We can see this. I can see this, where in the case of the company where I sit in 4 boards, one is really the board, the company that was started by our current chair and also CEO at the same time. Because he started the company, he's still there, bringing it to a certain level of development. Another one is being run now by third generation children, and there are actually now 3 families, not just one family that's in control. That could be a good, a situation that might call for an independent chair. But so far what we've done is to increase the number of independent directors. From 2, starting this year, we will have 3 independent directors. In the other company, where there are potentially many heirs, then that's potentially a situation where an independent director would be helpful in resolving the problem.
Yeah, I guess what's coming out here is that the concept of a chairman of the board being an independent director in a publicly listed company is something that has to be taken into context and should not be prescribed. And then it is a concept that has to evolve based on the needs of the boards and of course the current status of the boards. Well, good. Thank you very much. And I suppose I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
Yeah, no, I think Fred said something that's very critical. If you recall what I said in my talk, an ID cannot do it alone. One ID. You may have a chairman. You cannot do it alone. You need the support of everyone. So I think that what he said, having several IDs or 7 non-executive directors is also very critical to have that objective view. Do you agree, Fred?
Yep, agree.
Okay.
Roman, you want to say something?
Yeah, JJ, I'd like to take up a point that Flor just brought up, and I think it sort of ties this conversation in a little bit together. And I think that's sort of going it alone piece. I think a lot of companies engage in what I call supply-driven nominations, and they sort of cast the lookout on what's in the market, who's in the market. And again, no disrespect to anybody on this panel or anybody I've ever met, but I have seen this in some companies where they, company will cast a lookout on the market and say, we can get that person, we can get that person, without often spending enough time reflecting on what the company's real needs are.
Yes.
And I see that as a sort of one of these nasty habits that has a way of getting ingrained in the nomination process. What Flora is addressing is really critical. Simply having a warm body called an independent director is not sufficient for raising value in a company. I think it's really critical that a company looks for creating a dynamic context in which an independent director or directors, plural, because I do believe that going it alone is really, really tough for independence, but a number of directors coming independently brought together with the real needs of what a company is striving to get, what the long-term strategy might be, and a very, very careful approach at nomination selection of the right person at the right time to do the right kind of job. Anybody can be a warm body at a table, but not everybody can be exactly the right person at the right time to be able to push with the right kind of gusto, with the right kind of attitude to get the company to where it can start building real value. I think that that's a critical point.
And that's why, quite apart from competence, you need stature.
Great.
The independent director should have a stature in the community.
Yeah, but again, stature should not be alone, because you can
aside from competence,
but if the person doesn't
competence and stature.
Okay, because
in the just competence,
because in the banking industry, and Nenette would know this, boy, you know, the committees are just, you know, the board members are all working members. So
Yes,
you
yes.
cannot have just stature.
I wasn't
But-
saying
but
just
the
stature. I said quite apart from competence.
Okay, okay.
Person has to have stature as well. You know, it cannot be just
Competence,
stature.
stature,
That,
and
that was
working.
the old way. The old way was to appoint people with stature, former government officials. You know, despite the fact that they're you know.
Yes, I
advancing
think I understand.
I think also apart from competence and stature, what's important is that the ID or any director for that matter is able to express his views. I mean, you may be very competent, as Flor said, you may be very competent, you may have the stature, but if you don't speak up at all, then you're really just a warm body there.
Yeah, because
so all of these things should come into play. You have a role to play. So don't just sit there and, was it who said, you cannot just be a plant. You cannot just be a decorative body there. You have to be able to express your views.
Nanette, this is what I was alluding to a little bit earlier. Very often when independent directors are caught as a solo act, I also find this to be true, unfortunately, when one woman is nominated to the board. People feel isolated when they're alone in a particular subset within the board. And I think it's really important that if companies want to avoid that, if good chair people want to avoid that kind of isolation of the independent director, companies really should start thinking about nominating one or two or three more in addition to that first one, so that you avoid that trap that a lot of independents may get caught in when they can't speak up.
Great. So now we've established the fact that, you know, it's not enough, willingness to work, willingness to say our piece, and, you know, that kind of thing. There's a question here, just very quick response from the panelists that asks about the readiness of the general business environment to welcome these types of independent directors that will be saying their piece, that directors that will really be, you know, trying to be more active, as described later on. What is your sense on the readiness of many organizations or listed companies right now in the Philippines? Is it right for such kind of an independent director, or do we still have to have some work moving? Dr. Fred?
Yeah. These days, I noted the demand is for independent directors who have competence in IT.
Yeah.
Because many companies, almost all companies would, and it has been said, you know, all companies now, every company now is a digital company. So every organization is trying to pursue a digital transformation strategy. And one important skill that they are looking for is somebody who can bring in the knowledge of digital technology. Unfortunately, there are not too many. So the alternative in some companies is the hiring of board advisor or a consulting company. Normally, this year, those with the technical competence are relatively young.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So, yeah, they've not yet achieved that what I call stature in the community.
Yeah.
So they would initially be hired as a consultant,
that's right.
and those with already established maybe as a board advisor.
Great, thank you very much. There's another question here that talks about, if I may just read a question from Bruce. In this time of the pandemic, how have independent directors helped shape decision-making of the country's biggest conglomerates? You represent that. Are boardrooms empowered by more independent directors able to navigate crisis better? What have they brought into the table? I mean, the question on the value, precisely the topic of this session. During the pandemic, what type of value did these independent directors bring? We've heard Attorney Nende talk about, filling up board, board vacancies and management vacancies? Are there any other values as well? And please talk about also the empowerment component of independent directors, which I think also is very key. Anybody, please?
If I may, in the bank, well, we do have, as Flo was saying, there are many board committees already existing, but especially during the time of the pandemic, we would have regular briefings about the situation on the ground with our clients and with our employees, especially when you have many branches and thousands of employees. So in these reports, it was really not just the independent directors, but most of the directors were uniform in wanting the company to do more, to reach out more to the employees, those who are in the countryside, with respect to their ability to get medical attention when needed, with respect to their ability to get the vaccines. So this was reaching out. You know, the corporate social responsibility was being practiced at its best, because here you are at the time of the pandemic when nobody knows what's out there, and you have your board trying to come up with ways and means, working closely with management in order to ensure that all of its stakeholders are protected. I think that was very evident in the bank that I'm with.
Thank you very much, Attorney Nana. Just since I have you now, just a question for you. Did I get it correctly that there is a regulation of the Insurance Commission that the chairman of the audit committee cannot be chairman of any other committee?
Yes, can be a member, but not the chair.
Right.
There is a provision in the Code of Corporate Governance.
Great, thank you. Oh, there is a question here. It is going to listen.
Also the Corporation Code, by the way, sorry.
All right, well, thank you very much. Question, are directors better directors because they are independent?
Better for whom?
But that's a good.
Better for whom? If I'm not independent, I can be better for the owners, the controlling shareholders, you know. But not better for the minority shareholders.
Yeah.
An independent director is able to balance the interest of the various stakeholders.
That's a very good point that you raised.
Yeah, but if you bring it in the context of corporate governance, any director actually, whether you are an ED, an ID, or whatever, under corporate governance, the director is supposed to be part of the body, the board. And as a collegial body, you are supposed to direct and control the operations of the company to ensure that it is going in the right direction. So I would imagine that if you are an independent director, perhaps in a way you can say it is better, because then your focus is really on what is good for the company and not for any particular group or interest. I mean, that's my sense.
Roman,
can I come in on that? Because I'd like to link that question to the question that was posed earlier about a board in crisis and whether an independent board member can add value during crisis. And I think that it's really important that the force of an independent board member is one who's out protecting their reputation rather than pursuing anybody's individual interest, and really protecting the company from itself. To me, what I like about the independent board member and why I think that they are, I don't want to use the word better, but why they are an important part of it is they are the keel of the ship. They are the one that right the ship. They can discipline a board at a time of crisis, for example. They are the ones who are not pursuing their own interests as either as shareholders or some other interest as representatives of a particular party or a side. They really are there to right the ship when crisis hits. And in that, are they better? I think that they are critically important to the dynamics of the board, which other board members just simply cannot bring. I would imagine that many board members, all board members, I would like to think are good at what they do. And they bring in the forthrightness and the intelligence and the stamina and everything else that you need to be a good board member. But what no other board member can bring is that discipline that an independent board member can introduce into a conversation, whether it's during crisis, and I've seen it many, many times during very high levels of crisis, not just the pandemic, but very acute crisis, where a board member who is not vested because they've got money in the game or other skin in the game, they are there to discipline the board, get them back to basics, and get them to focus on the matter at hand for the betterment of the long-term interests of the company. So yeah, I do think that there's a tick up in terms of better for independence in this space.
Yeah, thank you very much, Roman. The question from Fred Perungao is, yes, one comes in as an independent director, and nobody gets in the context of a company with a controlling shareholder. Nobody gets in without obviously being voted in and the consent, of course, of the controlling shareholder. So if a person gets invited to be an independent director of a company, how does one remain to be independent? What are your suggestions or the process or some tips you may have that you remain to be independent, assuming you were brought in really to perform real work? So your experience would be good.
Yeah, I'll answer.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Well, actually, as I said, the basic is always act in the best interest of the company. That's the very basic thing as a director. And if you do that, and you do the right things, right, okay.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it.
Some say it's signaling the willingness to step away from the board if and when that independence.
Yes. I agree. I think it's very important for an independent director to be ready to leave if your values are compromised.
And that's signaled to the controlling shareholder.
Yes, that's a very strong signal, yes.
That's also the strength of an independent board member, is to be able to get up and go when the time is bad or when something's impossible. But to the question of diminishing independence, I think that there are well-accepted governance sort of timelines for when independence becomes.
Don't go into that topic.
That's it. That's okay. We'll get back to that if we have time. But Dr. Pascual, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to refer back to what Nanette said. Courage,
Yeah.
Courage. To stick to your values and the courage to go if you're overwhelmed,
Okay.
By the...
Medyo mahaba agenda natin rin, no?
Medyo, sir, kasi we have an additional item, sir. It's whistleblower.
Wala
Francis. Okay. All right.
But not, sir,
replied?
Sent any response yet.
Yeah, that's we should come up with a policy. Paano yung mga anonymous na yan?
Francis?
Ano bang best practice?
Francis. There you go.
Francis,
these things happen. These things happen. Again, let's get back. And they also say financial independence is also very important, because if financially dependent on his or her directorship, then that compromises the independence. All right. Question, since we talk about independent directors, there was a question from Lorna Kapunan about the pool of independent directors. Is there really is becoming small, as she says, with many independent directors sitting in multiple boards? How then could other people similarly trained, committed, passionate about directorship, how can they be considered for boards, of course, other than joining ICD, I suppose? And any comments on that?
Well, I was going to say, unfortunately, you beat me to it. I am a member of the ICD, that's the Institute of Corporate Directors. Like I mentioned earlier, I did not know anyone from PruLife UK. So I do not even know that there is really a pool, a small pool at that, of independent directors, because on a regular basis, if you are a member of the ICD, you do get email advice about companies that are looking for independent directors. And these are sent to all the members, and you can take a look at which company this is. They give you a short background, what are the requirements, and you are free to email back. And there is a control there where you indicate that you're interested in becoming an independent director of this firm. So I don't really know that there is a small pool only. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, my having been an independent director was not because I was a member of any particular organization or pool.
Yeah, yes. I would echo that, Nanette. That's a great comment. And to Lorna, who asked the question, I would say put your hand up and ask for a board seat. I've seen this in many countries where people complain, there's a small, old boys club, or it's very difficult to get in. And my advice is just stand up and ask for it. And maybe you'll get it, maybe you won't. But good people do rise to those opportunities, and there are more companies looking for independent board members. Those opportunities are opening up. Experience is a big issue. A lot of independent board members, one of the key things that people want in an independent board member is experience on other boards. So there is a little bit of a trade-off to be had there. But Lorna, I would say just stand up and keep asking for a board seat, and hopefully one day you'll get one and you'll come back and tell us how you did.
So Dr. Pascual.
Yeah, I just about to say that some countries have started experimenting on organizing pools, where people are certified. Technically, I mean, by regulation, they're certified to be independent. I think India is an example, where they're starting to create a pool of independent directors. In the Philippines, it's not a big problem because we have very few publicly listed companies, although the demand for independent directors has been expanded, to include insurance companies and other companies with public interest or vested in public interest. So, in fact, now the demand is growing, in terms of number. Rural banks also and many other banks are required to get independent directors. So that's one approach: create a pool. But as Nanette says, the ICD is one such pool, But in other countries, it's the government agency that creates the pool.
So I guess it is agreed that there is not much of an issue on the supply side of potential independent directors. But what is the sense of the members of the panel on the demand side? Demand side in a sense that is there really a structured, deliberate effort to select independent directors, or it is pretty much still a perfunctory exercise to just show that there has been a process there, and then at the end of the day they just hire people they know? I'm just trying to be a little bit more controversial here, but what is your sense? Are companies really very serious in recruiting directors based on their requirement, or is it just one of those signalings again we talked about earlier? Anybody?
Personal experience?
Yes.
I think the new crop of CEOs and chairmen are conscious about being able to define the character or characteristics of an independent director that they would want to bring in. In one case, one company I'm in, we had a short list of 3, and we considered them. In another company, same way, there was a short list and very clear skills that being sought.
Yes.
I think the old way, it's all based on friendship, on network. That cannot be denied. That was the old way.
Yes.
But things are
I think in listed companies, it's a little bit different because there's an accountability factor that perhaps doesn't exist in private companies. I think in private companies, it's definitely the case. You're always going to look for somebody who's kind of going to be close, independent, but kind of close, exactly what Fred's talking about. But in listed companies, my experience has shown that you do have a real effort to try and find proper independent people. And there's analysts throughout the market that are going to spend a lot of time examining those kinds of appointments. And so it's a little more difficult to get onto that friendly list, although it does happen in some markets. But yeah, I agree. And in private companies, it's tough.
Right.
Yeah.
Where it is difficult to get directors is in the GOCCs, you know.
Oh, it's a different
Also,
dynamic.
big concerns about being implicated in lawsuits.
No, but let me just say, for banks, it's very critical to have the right independent director, because the independent directors are the very much working directors in the banks, as Nenet would know. So you cannot afford, the banks cannot afford to have an independent director that's not knowledgeable. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. There's a question here from Mr. I'm not sure if this is Mr. Johnny Santos, but Mr. Juan Santos to Dr. Pascual as a lead independent director. The question goes, basically he talks about the role and expectations from lead independent director warrants further discussion since this is a relatively new function. Who appoints the lead independent director? I think it's a good question. Shouldn't he be appointed or named by the independent director themselves in the true spirit of independence? In your case, how are you appointed as lead independent director?
Discussion approved by the board.
Board, and were you nominated by your fellow independent directors, or at least in the case?
Yeah, I would not say explicitly, but through internal discussions.
Right. Yeah, and I think he deserves it. He was the president of ICD. So he knows corporate governance.
we will establish, I don't know what we can establish by way of precedents, you know, on how a lead independent director would do it.
Thank you.
Because we don't have any established record or jurisprudence on it. You know.
Right.
No, actually now there is like for best practice, the independent directors meet. Okay, and the lead independent director can lead that meeting and discuss issues about the company.
In fact, we do that, you know, and the venue is always the audit committee meeting, because all in the companies where I'm director, there are 3 independent directors, and in all cases, they're members of the audit committee.
Okay. We held that in PNB, and it's a separate meeting from any of the committees.
Because the audit committee is the BCS committee also.
Oh, okay.
In non-bank corporations.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a question here from June Borromeo. Is the chairman emeritus entitled to sit in the executive session? I suppose this is in the context of a board where the chairman emeritus probably is the founding, the founder.
Why not? Why not?
There's no rule. There's no rule.
Yeah, why not?
It depends on, if the existing chairman, the sitting chairman allows it.
I'll step in and be the controversial partner here. No, absolutely not. I'm a big opponent of the position of chairman emeritus or any sort of shadow director type position in terms of good governance. I don't think it's a useful. In fact, I think it's a detrimental position. I know that I'm speaking to an audience in a region where emeritus is very important. I understand that. But I think in this conversation, given what it's for and to understand good governance and the value of it, I think that we need to be very clear that it's a very difficult discussion to tread around only because of the links, whether it's family or founder or whatever. But to me, the presence of someone who is an emeritus chairperson is incredibly disruptive to the flow of a meeting. And after all, that meeting is meant, whether it's at the management level or at the board level or any one of the committee levels, that meeting is meant for the betterment and for the interests of the long-term success of the company, not the ego of a founder. I'm sorry, that's the blunt way of putting it. But I think, I'll come down on that side of it. And if that's controversial and I don't get asked back, so be it. But that's where I stand.
Yes, it's good. It's good. It's a fair call. if Roman, just we have to follow up on that, you would not have a problem if Chairman Emeritus is given based on honorific for as long as he or she does not have any governance function. Is that correct?
Yeah, no governance function, definitely.
But even on the honorific, I mean, even their presence in a room, you know, like we've all seen the situation in a family company where the old founder is sitting and you know, looks over their glasses and all of a sudden everybody's opinion suddenly changes and we don't know why, but you know, it happens. So I think we need to be very careful and mindful of how people like that are brought into a company and how, I'm not saying they should be eliminated, but let's find a place for them. And I think that putting them in management meetings or putting them in board meetings where decisions need to be made on the basis of some other interest other than their own personal or their own ego interests, I think that that's got to be taken into consideration.
Right.
Normally, the chairman emeritus are very old people, you know.
And again, I mean no disrespect. I understand that as a dynamic in the region. I don't want to be the boogeyman here in the back.
That's why they will not be able to attend anyway, you know.
more of an honorific than anything else. But you know, it's just that's the beauty of sessions like this. We are free to express our views, either contrary or aligned with the rest. A question here from Cora on risk management and the role of the risk management committee during the crisis. Is there anybody here who sit in the risk management committee and perhaps can share very briefly their experience on how the risk management committee actually performed during this pandemic and how, what value it created to the organization? Did anybody?
No.
None?
Well, you know, in the bank, there are so many risks. So in the risk committee, although I'm not a member of the risk committee, there's so many risks and each risk is always discussed. And now, like, you know, like cyber security, reputational risk, credit risk, economic risk, market risk, you know, all of this, it's all discussed. And also in the banks, because we are always audited by the central bank, then the report on examination is always discussed in the risk committee.
Great, thanks.
JJ, can I just? I have an interesting anecdote from an African company that I worked with. It was an airline that had a plane crash, a very nasty plane crash, and it was the risk committee of the board that became the chief sort of lead in the communication from the company on the situation in the days and weeks immediately following the crash. So I think that risk committees, if they're calibrated correctly, then they should be able to switch into high gear during crisis. And because they're knowledgeable of you know, that forethinking and what's coming and what might face the company overall, they're very uniquely positioned in being able to become that spokes group or spokespeople or spokes individual, somebody from that risk committee to be able to do that. So in this airlines situation, for about a period of 6 months, in the immediate aftermath of the accident, that was the committee that really became the new board, and it was small and it was nimble and really able to step up because they had the right skill set. So just a small anecdotal example.
Right. Yes, Dr. Pascual.
Yeah, one thing is sure, no Risk Oversight Committee was able to anticipate on the magnitude of its impact. Yes, I chair the Risk Oversight Committee of 2 companies, you know.
Yeah.
And we did not anticipate this, but we've been active in monitoring in discussing what the company, what management is doing with respect to the employees, you know, what it's doing to protect the health of the employees, and the risk on the systems, you know, given the reduced manpower going to the office.
Yeah, I am actually in a bind right now. There is quite a number of questions that still has to be answered, and I would like to give everyone the chance to give their closing remarks. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to read the last few questions and comments, if you don't mind, and feel free to address them in the concluding statements that you are going to make. Would that work?
Okay.
So that in that way we are able to just pick, you know, you need not respond to all of the questions, but then give you a minute or so to give your concluding remarks. And allow me first just to read the questions that I missed so far, so that we are able to cover many, if not all, of the questions asked by our participants. This has been very interesting discussion, and I think I thought we were not going to be having this many questions. Okay, so let me go to this. There is a question from Reynaldo Casas about the standard norm or honorarium given to independent directors. I guess some of the questions would be around, do they need to be paid more or differently? And then there's a question on, for Attorney Nenet on the control, the explanation of what control means. Ambassador Quisha had a comment. The quality of, has a comment. The quality of the director is not determined by whether the director is independent or not, but it is the qualities and qualifications of the individual director. That was a comment.
Yeah.
Christina Tan, when the interest of the majority and minority shareholders differ, which should take precedence? And then Darren, is the board's non-involvement to management operations an absolute thing? When should the board intervene in operations? Is it the role of the independent directors to police this? And finally, is an independent director indeed independent? I think that's a philosophical question. So those are some of the questions that you may or may not wish to address, but I'd like to spend these last few minutes to hear you, about a minute or so, with your parting shots. Okay, let's reverse the order if you don't mind. Let's start with Roman for your parting shot.
Thanks, JJ. And indeed, as I'm following along with these questions, there are some great questions, and they're probably each the foundation for a session twice as long as the one we've had already. So thanks very much for the question. I'd like to focus perhaps a little bit on Darren DeJesus' question on the involvement in management. I think it's very there is no absolute, I think is the right answer. There is, I think one of the things you'll probably glean from my approach to governance is that we shouldn't be terribly prescriptive. We should focus on sort of broad generalizations, and then depending on the context that we face, we should adapt accordingly with an eye on doing the right thing, so to speak. But I think that the board has a duty to intervene when things are going particularly bad. In many companies, we see this, when management is in disarray, very often you will see somebody from the board step in and act as a CEO or act as a CFO, depending on what the needs might be. So is it the role of independent directors to police this? To some extent, perhaps. I think that again, that discipline that I alluded to earlier has to take place in the conversation. There has to be a very, very careful decision so that some shareholder doesn't step forward and just simply take control of the company as they see, simply because maybe they're unhappy with how management is doing something. I think there has to be a very sober conversation about when the board needs to step in. A phrase that I'm very fond of is that boards should have their nose in management's affairs, but their hands far away from it. And occasionally you have to bring your hands closer to where the nose is in order to understand how things are going. But again, I think this is part of the iterative process that a board needs to go through in its conversations about its distance to or from. When things are going well, stay far away. When things are in high crisis, get very, very close and quickly and engage as appropriate. So that's what I would say. My last one, I love the last question from Mari Sison Garcia. Is an independent director indeed independent? And that is just the biggest can of worms question I've ever seen. How long is a piece of string? It's really, really hard to tell. And that's, I think, what makes this such an exciting topic. Independence is a very subjective thing, and yet it's a critical thing, and we need it at boards more and more. So the judgment on independence is a constant flow and a constant one. I'll leave it at that. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Roman. Thank you very much indeed. Ms. Flor?
Yeah. Well, I'll try to summarize. One of the most important things for the board really is to hire and fire the CEO. So if you have an excellent CEO, you don't have to meddle with the management. So that's the primary function that you should have a very good CEO. And as a director, Director Quisha mentioned, just labeling independent. It really also depends on the values of the individual. So make sure you get an independent director that has good values. Do the right thing. Do the right thing right the first time. And when in doubt, pray. Thank you.
And get mad. Thank you very much.
And get mad, yes. Make a difference all the time.
Dr. Pascual, please. Thank you.
Yes, I think the roles that independent directors should play are generally categorized into two: the monitoring role and the advisory role, and both could add value. Monitoring will, help prevent fraudulent actions or any misconduct, and advisory would help develop the strategic direction of the company. And in particularly in this very fast-changing world, managing the risks to which the company is subjected. That is how I view the value-creating role of the board. I mean, of the independent director. The value to the company, as has been emphasized earlier. Whatever is good for the company is good for all the stakeholders.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Pascual. Attorney Nenep.
Well, I go back. The independent director is a servant leader because you are a director of the company. You are not a director of any controlling stockholder or of any particular interest. You are there to serve the company for the benefit of the company. And here I distinguish between the board and management. Somebody asked, what do you mean by control or direct? Corporate governance is the board acting collegially to direct and control the affairs of the corporation, as distinguished from management, which runs the company, the day-to-day operations, manages the company. So it is the board that is the overarching. It sets the tone. It is the one that sets the mission, vision, the values. And it is management that now implements this. So by and large, the board does not interfere with management unless it sees that management is not anymore aligned to what the board has set for itself as being the values of the company, as being the mission and the vision of the company. And that's where, again, the independent director, the role of the independent director is that you have a voice and that you must be heard.
Well, very well said. Thank you. Thank you very much. Special thanks to Dr. Roman Sila, who, what time is it there now in DC? It's about 3 a.m., right?
2:30 in the morning.
2:30 in the morning. Well, thank you very much for really spending the time with us. And also, of course, the other panelists, Ms. Flor, Dr. Pascual, Attorney Nenet. Thank you very much for sharing insights. And indeed, the discussion on independent directors is an ongoing one, and the value that they bring is an ongoing one. There will always be people who will continue to challenge the concept of independent directors and the value that they bring in. However, there will be organizations, boards and chairmen, and even controlling shareholders that begin to or have already embraced the concept that indeed independent directors do create value. And I would make a bet that those organizations will be rewarded by their markets and in due time if they are not enjoying those rewards already. So at that point, I would like to bring this session to a close, and I would like to call on the Vice President, Mr. Noel Bonoan. Before we adjourn, do you have any parting words?
There's nothing I can say to add to this very enlightening discussion. You've said it all, our panelists have said it all. Thank you to all of you. Congratulations, JJ, to the Corporate Governance Committee for putting together this fantastic session. And really, there's nothing much more I can say but to adjourn this session. And please, everyone, thank you. Stay safe and have a fantastic day ahead.
Thank you very much. It's 2:30 p.m., but there is one important thing we need to do, though, which is the customary photo opportunity. So I would like to request all of those participants, not participants, but the panelists to keep their videos open for this very, very important photo op.
Okay,
so
please.
Everyone who goes on this?
Be ready. 1, 2, 3. Another one, please. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Everyone, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a great afternoon. Roman, have a great sleep. You can sleep now.
Morning.
Morning.
Mabuhay. Mabuhay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you, JJ. Thank you, everyone.